All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the regular committee of the whole meeting to order. Welcome to our March 25th regular meeting. I'd firstly like to recognize we're on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Goury. The question period sign-up sheet is at either end of the gallery partition, and if you have any questions regarding an agenda item, I'd ask you to please write down your name and the agenda item on the list, and at the start of question period, I'll call up those who signed up at the podium. If those of you who've been observing the little shuffling of chairs tonight, it's because actually our procedure bylaw says that the acting mayor is supposed to chair the committee of the whole meetings, but Councillor Bonner, given some careful duties he had to attend to between having chaired the GPC meeting this afternoon, suggested I simply chair tonight. So we'll carry on somewhat in breach of our bylaw, if that's all right, in the absence of Councillor Thorpe as well. Introduction of late items, Ms. Goury.
Thank you, Worship. So there's no late items, but there is a correction on the actual agenda under item 7A. There was a typo in the last name, and it's supposed to be Victoria Drakeford, sorry. So I just wanted to point out the error and apologize.
Ms. Drakeford, I know, is a woman of some modesty and kindness, and I'm sure she'll be forgiving. I see her nodding affirmatively. Yes, thank you. Motion for the adoption of the agenda as modestly amended with that correction. Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favour, motion carried. You've all had a chance to read the various minutes. Motion for the adoption of the minutes. Councillor Turley, seconded Councillor Hemmons. All those in favour, motion carried. Thank you. We have no presentations, but we do have a number of delegations, and I would just remind everyone who's here, it's 5 minutes. At 4 minutes, the light will change color to orange, and I will possibly remind you that you have a minute left. And the first one is Bruce Gibbons, the Merville Water Guardians. Mr. Merville, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors and staff of the City of Nanaimo, thank you very much for allowing me to address you this evening. My name is Bruce Gibbons, and I live in Merville in the Comox Valley. I'm here tonight to address Council about the issue of protecting groundwater all over Vancouver Island and indeed all over British Columbia. My campaign started with a water license that was approved in the Merville area approximately a year ago for a resident there to bottle and sell water from the shared Comox Valley aquifer. We successfully campaigned for the CVRD to deny the rezoning that was necessary for him to bottle the water on site, which temporarily stopped the operation. However, his water license is still valid, so I've been campaigning to prevent him from trucking the water to a site that does allow the bottling, and I'm now approaching all of the AVICC member communities, asking them to revise their bylaws to prevent the bottling of groundwater by any water license holder and to avoid this type of issue in the future anywhere on Vancouver Island. I filed an appeal against the water license, but the Environmental Appeal Board dismissed my appeal, stating that I did not prove that the license would detrimentally affect my land. Not my water, not my access to water, but my land. The Water Sustainability Act did not protect my water or my access to water, and I find that appalling. We have approximately 1,200 signatures to date on a petition asking the provincial government to stop approving licenses to bottle and sell groundwater. And that petition will be presented in the legislature this coming Wednesday by our MLA. We also have an online petition in support of that petition with approximately 1,340 signatures on it. If BC's aquifers are depleted, then the thousands of residents and farmers who rely on them will not be able to look after their personal needs for drinking water, for sanitation purposes, growing their backyard gardens, growing their crops, or raising their livestock. That would put our food security at risk. Without water, farmers cannot produce our food. And as we have seen with the severe drought in California, we will not be able to continue to rely on importing our food from that source. Without water, there is no life. Population growth will put more demand on the aquifers, and we're already seeing the negative effects of climate change impact the quality and quantity of water all over Vancouver Island, as evidenced by the level 4 drought that we experienced last summer. There's not enough information known about our aquifers to risk bottling and selling any of that water. let alone the millions of liters of water being bottled and sold by corporations for huge profits. Climate change is causing extended periods of drought, putting rivers, streams, fish habitat, and fish stocks at risk. We're seeing receding glaciers and diminishing snowpacks. Many water systems on Vancouver Island are currently reporting extreme low water levels for this time of year and warning that there may be serious repercussions in the summer. So in essence, we're in the middle of a winter drought. There is an existing real threat to the groundwater of Vancouver Island. I've approached all of the towns and cities in the Comox Valley, Village of Cumberland, the City of Courtenay, the town of Comox, and the regional district, asking them to prohibit the bottling of groundwater. And all but the town of Comox have already done so or are in the process of doing so. The town of Comox I just recently appeared before, and that they're still under consideration. I also approached the Strathcona Regional District because the license holder had indicated that he would be going to their region to try and bottle the water there. They acted very quickly to stop that and went so far as to draft a resolution that will be presented at the AVICC convention in April, asking the provincial government to cease approving licenses to bottle groundwater. And I was very pleased to have them standing behind us on this.
1 minute.
So I've contacted all of the AVICC communities, many of whom already prohibit bottling of groundwater, and many of them, I'll also put my presentations on their agendas and have it under consideration. So this evening I have two requests for the City of Nanaimo. Number one, that you consider taking the necessary steps to implement a bylaw that prohibits the bottling of groundwater in any of your zoning to help protect our groundwater today and for our children and grandchildren in the future. And number two, that you support the Strathcona Regional District resolution when it comes before the April AVICC convention, asking the provincial government to cease approval of licenses for commercial extraction of groundwater for bottling or bulk water sales. We cannot allow water bottling from our aquifers based on theory and calculations. The consequences of being wrong would be catastrophic. So I'm asking that the city please support my requests.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gibbons. Does council have any questions for the delegation? Councillor Martman.
Thank you. Through the chair, you did note that there are 15 communities right now, I'm assuming in BC, that do not permit the bottling of groundwater.
That's
Do you,
correct.
off the top of your head, can you name about a few of those?
Parksville, Port Alberni, Metchosin,
Okay, so
North Cowichan Valley. These are all Vancouver, so they're members of the AVICC.
I'm very much in favor of protecting our water and definitely not for private use and resale. So I'm going to move a notice of motion, I believe is what's correct here, and that I would like to move that we do work towards implementing a bylaw that prohibits bottling of groundwater. And there is one motion that the Sunshine Coast Regional District, there is a policy there that perhaps we could build on that policy or use that policy.
Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just some advice, parliamentary advice and procedure advice. I think that it might be best if Councillor Martman provides us that wording and we put it as a notice of motion at the next council meeting. And then from there, it will go from a council meeting to the next council meeting to then be discussed, etc.
Thank you, perfect.
So we'll do it that way. So we won't put it as a notice of motion this evening, but we'll work with you and get that on the next agenda.
And I trust staff will be able to provide us with a little background and information as well. Any further questions to the delegation? Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the delegation, just a clarification as to what the definition of groundwater is. Is that all freshwater, whether it's lake, river, aquifers?
No, surface water is lakes, rivers, streams, etc. Groundwater is water that has to be extracted from the aquifers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Seeing no further speakers, Mr. Gibbons? Oops, sorry? Yes? No?
Sorry, my question's for staff.
I just want to thank you for taking your time to come down here today and demonstrating good citizenship and care for the environment. That's very gracious of you, and thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to address you.
The next is a delegation, a well-known figure, Dr. Hasselbach, Medical Health Officer, Island Health, regarding community health.
I have a question for staff regarding the last delegation.
Oh, sorry. Ms. Hemmons, Councillor Hemmons has a question for staff before you start.
Thank you. It's a question regarding the last delegation. I was just waiting for delegation to leave to ask staff. The process of it going through AVICC, how long would, if AVICC pushes it forward to UBCM and UBCM approves it and this is a new provincial mandate, are we then doubling up on our work by creating a bylaw?
Your Worship, the UBCM submits a set of recommendations to the province for consideration.
Okay.
So it's not a provincial mandate because it comes from UBCM. They will take it under advisement and may or may not act on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Hasselbach, welcome.
Your Worship, members of council, I'm too used to coming here. I'm used to 10 minutes, so this is going to be a little bit of a whirlwind, so I apologize. Most of you know who I am. I am your medical health officer, which oftentimes begs the question, what does a medical health officer do? And I'd like you to think of me as an extension of your administration when it comes to health issues in particular. And I do bring to you a definition of health which is a bit broader than just understanding the treatment of disease, which is often what the health system thinks about. And many times when we're talking about the prevention or the promotion of health and well-being, it's very much about what it is that I get involved with. Some of you will have seen this graph in the past that talks about various different diseases, the risk factors associated with them, and more recently our discussion of determinants of health and the web that exists between trying to address those determinants on the right-hand side, which are often based in early life and healthy lifestyles, right through to the development of disease subsequently. Or more easily thought of, we're all on this uphill battle that's called aging, and each of us is pushing a ball of various different sizes, and it gets more and more steep depending on how many of these determinants we have marked against us going forward. So what we're trying to do is at least get out that there are ways of staying healthy, and that's part of what you have a great deal to do with. Under various different pieces of legislation, you will find that you have duties and responsibilities as a local government for public health. I flagged them there. They're actually appended to the presentation afterwards, where specifically, but most importantly, you need to identify health hazards. You need to communicate them with me. You have to listen to what I have to say. Doesn't mean you have to agree with me, but you've got to listen to it, and that usually means letting me know what your opinions are afterwards. And there are particular processes which the City of Nanaimo has been really good about following. As your medical health officer, I can also be a consultant and support to you on a variety of different issues of which I've linked up there. Sometimes as often as just coming down to wayfaring to get you through a healthcare system. If you're not quite sure where to go, don't hesitate to get a hold of me and ask the question. And certainly when it comes to emergency planning and disaster scenarios, hopefully our office can be of assistance to you. We talk from a public health perspective about surveillance, promotion, protection, and disease prevention. And at least those top three ones are where we have a shared responsibility and a shared goal. When it comes to disease prevention, it's more the individual specific services. So what's hot out there in terms of public health issues? I've listed them up there. Overdose and housing are number 1 and 2 for most communities. Some other things, particularly alcohol, is definitely making a resurgence in terms of our concerns, and I'm going to share some early childhood issues that have been longstanding in front of this council, and unfortunately we haven't been able to move forward on. What is simmering out there are the issues of poverty and wealth inequity, climate change, transportation, healthier environments. We were just talking about the OCP review coming up. Great time to actually look at health, aging, and family structures. So in terms of your data, which is part of what I try to do in coming and providing a report to you, which I'm mandated to do, we know Nanaimo is slightly less healthy than the rest of the island and the rest of BC. This is pretty standard. It is improving, but it remains somewhat reduced life expectancy, carried more by males than females. We also know that we have a wide variation that exists in the preparedness of our children for school. And so not only do we have an issue of higher levels of children who aren't ready to start school, but the inequity of where they're distributed is fairly significant within Nanaimo, and that actually augments the problems. I mentioned the issues of alcohol. I do flag to you the purple line because it's going up much faster while tobacco is going down. We all know about our illicit drug situation. We didn't get the updated slide. Okay, this is Alberni. You don't want to see that. The good news is that we saw a reduction in 50% of our overdose rates in the last year, and this is a good thing for Nanaimo. We talk about transportation. I just thought I'd flag this one in terms of our lack of utilization of active transportation in Nanaimo as a healthier lifestyle, something you might want to consider. So in concluding in my last 8 seconds, key things: housing insecurity and overdose crisis, both in terms of the short and long-term health impacts. We know about the disease indicators being generally lower. Much of that is based upon determinants of health where we can probably make the greatest gains. Otherwise, ELSER's utilization and access to services is comparable, and we see a reduction in child and well-being. I put up here some of the areas that we can share on, but I'd ask you what it is that you would
Dr.
like me to
Hasselback,
do.
I'm kind of ruthless on this because I have to be fair to others, and
Yep.
I suspect that we may have a few questions from councillors. Councillor Bonner first, then Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to Dr. Hasselback. A number of years ago, you made a presentation to council about children at risk entering the school system. And there was areas where it was around 33%, that sort of thing. I've just noticed on that particular slide, the south area of Nanaimo is now at 46%. Has that actually gone up in the last 4 years, or are we actually making a dent in it?
One of the references in there actually gives you access to the maps. I can share those maps with you relatively, and we have the information over time. Some of the areas are not improving, others are getting worse. I believe we have one area that actually is improving, and that's the Northfield Diver area, Lake area. So if you break it down and you actually look at those reports, you're going to find that there's variation between the regions within Nanaimo as well over the decade and a half that we've got data on.
And if I may, one more is, how can we as a council help move that dial? Because I'm quite of the opinion that if we can get that rate down to what it should be provincially, which I think is around 15%, it will make much difference 12 years from now when these children are graduating, are able to graduate. And then there'll be less homelessness people, there'll be less crime, that sort of thing. So what can we as a council do to turn that dial?
And through the chair, Councillor Bonner, thank you. There was a presentation brought to the previous council about a year ago that actually talked about a series of steps that were recommended to the council in terms of actions on children's issues. I do think that there are a variety that you can do. One of the first things to be considered, and I actually put it up there, is how do you make this a child-friendly community? That's a good starting point. I think there are lots of other things that we can do in conjunction with the early years partners out there. Unfortunately, as some of you know, the early years tables have not been renewed in terms of their funding after the end of this current month. And in Nanaimo, it's not clear how that group will actually move forward. So I think there's lots to have on that conversation specifically. And in the sake of time, I think it's one of those ones, please ask me to come back and let's just talk about children.
Please come back again and talk about children.
I believe Councillor Gesselbrock wanted on, but Councillor Armstrong jumped ahead of you, but we'll let Councillor Gesselbrock go ahead.
He's got to push his button.
Got to push a button.
Again, push it.
Through the chair to Dr. Hasselback.
Just curious, I saw a slide there quickly flash about actions that the local government could take to improve some of these health determinants, and I'm just curious to hear a bit more of what are some specific actions that we can to improve some of our health metrics.
Thank you, and through the chair, it gives me a chance to talk to a slide I didn't get to. Number one up there is actually looking at this issue of children and their well-being, and one of the first things I recommend is start looking at what does it take to become a child-friendly community. That'll take you through a series of steps that I think are important. Won't answer all the questions, but at least you've got to start somewhere putting children back on the agenda in this community. I flagged a couple of others up there. Housing insecurity, I know this council is looking at right now. Substance use, there are still many issues, but the one that doesn't get enough attention is this alcohol problem. And I do recommend that all councils in the Central Island be looking at municipal alcohol action plans. It's a specific approach. One other thing that Nanaimo hasn't spent a lot of time on yet is climate change adaptation. Again, something you might want to consider. And I think there's lots that council has done in a constructive fashion in the past, which are reflected in some of those actions. So thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you very much. I get many emails, usually 3 or 4 a week, talking about the lack of psychologists or psychiatrists for children. And of course, when they can't get help, that leads to possibly, increased drug use, et cetera. Is there a way that we can advocate, or you can advocate, that we get more of those here? Because it's very difficult to get any children that's suffering any type of trauma into help.
Thank you. Through the chair, Your Worship, Councillor Armstrong. Your question is, what could council do? And I think it's a really good one. I think that first, by saying you're concerned about it, is a very powerful statement. Those of us within the system are going to be in absolute concurrence. It's not necessarily just a lack of funding. It's more than that in terms of a lack of capacity in terms of the general population. These are difficult individuals to find. We're happy with what we can obtain and utilize. But if council is hearing something of that nature, communicate it, both in terms to the health authority, but also to the ministry specifically, saying that this is a concern.
Thank you.
No one else?
One more.
Councillor Bonner.
Trying to understand the relationship you have with council. A couple of years ago, there was a proposal presented to the city about having the world's largest water slide. And the decision came down that we couldn't reuse the water that was in the slide, and we had to use new water. And because we were in a water crisis at the time, and it was in the summer, it was decided not to go ahead with it. Did that decision come from you, or?
Through the chair, actually the decision not to proceed was one made by the city because of the drought.
Yeah.
But you're trying to put a balance in there. One of the things I've said in the past is, because of the regulatory functions that the medical health officer undertakes, one day I may be your worst enemy, but the next day I'll be your best friend. I have no trouble doing that for you. I do have to engage in some regulatory activities, and sometimes I can have to be fairly forceful in doing so. But on the other hand, that's that other stuff that I do, which is really trying to support you. I thought we had actually come up with a solution to the water slide, which was not inconsistent with what was available, assuming there was sufficient water, and had been adopted by other jurisdictions in BC. We had good discussion. It was the drought that curtailed that project.
Yeah, it was not a criticism or anything. I was just kind of who made that final decision. Thanks.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Looking at some of these items and then sort of thinking of our draft strategic plan and our priorities, I think this council would obviously like to pursue some of our strategic focus areas. And I'm wondering if there is opportunities where there's grant money available, for active transportation or housing, et cetera, et cetera. Is a letter of support from you possible if we reach out? If there's overlap with sort of the goals of the medical health officer?
Yeah, through the chair and to Councillor Brown, I'm not infrequently writing letters of support for local governments in terms of a variety of their activities. Not something I actually get a lot of requests from the City of Nanaimo for, so please feel free to do so. Your colleagues do frequently.
Anyone else? Dr. Hasselbach, thank you for your continued work on behalf of all the citizens. Do appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and
Thank
when I
you.
return next year, I'll try to make sure it's 5 minutes.
You're always welcome.
Thank you.
The next item is a delegation Fernando Fuentes regarding Amrico's building at 1400 Wingrove Street. Mr. Fuentes, please.
Good afternoon.
Good evening.
I just want to voice my concerns regarding this property. It's been a derelict site since 2013. It's unsafe. I've given you a handout with numerous pictures, and there's no fencing around the property. There is garbage laying around. RCMP has been called there numerous times. I've called records with the RCMP, and they were not allowed to disclose to me how many times they've been called to the site. The building it's in a prime location. You know, the city revamped the boardwalk down there. There's a new legacy project that just opened up. I also have concerns with the taxes and assessment of this property. It is a 8-unit strata, and the total of it comes to $316,000 with all the 8 units, and the property behind it on Wingrove Street has a total value. Their property assessment came to $929,000, and the property beside it on Departure Bay Road, because Amrico's is on the corner lot, the front page of your handout is 2755, and that property has also gone up. Had a $44,000 increase from the previous year, yet Amrico's with their 8 units has not. So, you know, I think it's been 5 years, it's time to go. I want to know what the city's, you know, planning on doing.
Is that the conclusion of your presentation?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions for the delegation? Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I know that this has been before council many, many times, and I know that the city's gone in and cleaned. After they did the first cleanup, did you notice a change in the graffiti and the number of?
Nope, the pictures I presented to you after the first page were taken yesterday morning, so all the garbage is still, you know, there's no fencing to prevent anyone from accessing the building. I've actually boarded up one of the doors because the owner of the building knocked on my door. I live 2 houses away, and asked me for nail and hammers, or, yeah, hammer and the nails, I mean.
Follow up, if I may. I believe at the last time that Marty was here, I believe, perhaps this will be a question for staff after, but I do believe the permit for demolition was in the works, so I'll have a question for staff after, Your Worship.
That's the appropriate order. Any further questions for the delegation? If none, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming. Some questions for
Thank you.
staff, Councillor Armstrong?
Through you, Your Worship, to staff. My understanding from talking with Mr. Lindsay that the permits were in the works. Is there any update, please?
Through your,
You're on, hang on.
It's fine.
again.
You're on now.
Okay, sorry, through your worship to the councillor's question, the demolition permit has been issued, and it has been picked up actually by the property owner, and they are able to proceed with demolition of the building under permit. There is a building permit in the works for development that was approved by council previously in early in 2018. And as well, I've been advised that the building has been inspected today with regard to security of the building under fire order. Chief Fry confirmed, her staff confirmed that it is considered secure as far as the fire order related to building security is concerned. Members of the public are encouraged to contact bylaw services or the fire department if they have concerns about building security. With regard to entry to the building, it's currently boarded and meets the secure requirements under the fire code.
Follow up, if I may. How long do they have to do demolition permit? there a set specific time that the demolition must be done within, or can they just keep dragging it out?
Sorry, through your worship again, to the councillor's question, the permit, I believe, is valid for a 6-month period. We can confirm that. But it was picked up within the last 2 weeks.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'm not sure who can answer this, maybe Councillor Brown. In terms of the assessment of the value of the land, and I know that a person can appeal their assessment to BC Assessment for their own land. Is the city capable of appealing the assessment of a property they think it's too low?
Good question.
Ms. Gurry. Yes.
Thank you, Worship. So having worked in finance a number of years, the staff member beside me says no.
If it gives any comfort, I'm inclined to agree with that legal opinion. Any further questions for staff? Thank you very much. Next is Heather Ambo regarding community safety near Rock City Centre. I don't see Miss Ambo tonight. All right. The next is reports. And it's the Rotary Centennial Garden from Maffeo Sutton Park. Mr. Harding is going to introduce it. Mr. Harding?
Thank you, Worship. I'm pleased to introduce a project we've been working on for a couple of years with the Rotarians. They'll come up in a few minutes and do a better presentation on the project than myself, but this is in cooperation with the City of Nanaimo and our redevelopment of Maffeo Sutton Playground, which is going to be adjacent to it, as well as a Child Development Center. We'll be proceeding with the playground later this year. We also would then like to work with Rotarians on their project and do it simultaneously. So there's a report in front of you of a few recommendations, which I can speak more to once the delegation has come up.
Thank you very much. And I might say, notwithstanding our affection for this, but Mr. Hammond and Ms. Drakeford, you're still limited to 5 minutes, so please come forward if you'd like. I'm sure there may be questions, though.
Your Worship, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dave Hammond. I live at 3712 Glen Oaks Drive here in Nanaimo. I'm here today to represent the Rotary Club of Nanaimo and to support the staff recommendations that you have in the report in front of you regarding the Rotary Centennial Garden proposal for Maffeo Sutton Park. The report that you have before you gutted with the remarks that I was going to give you, so I'm not going to repeat all of that all over again. I think it does an excellent job of summarizing the proposal. What I'd really like to do is bring Victoria Drakeford, our landscape architect, up and to show you the pictures. And after that, we can, and she has some commentary as well, after that we can answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for getting my name changed. So the Rotarians asked Kate Steffiuk, who's also in the here attending tonight, to design a garden.
Might want to lean more into the mic.
Is that better? Okay. To design a garden that would reflect their a public garden to reflect their 100 years of service. Do I have a little thingy here?
You should.
Okay. Nope. Okay. Okay. So we were asked to design a space that would reflect their work and values. And one of the things that the Rotarians do some amazing work, and we've just but wanted us really to create a garden that would reflect, be a sort of peace garden. And so we interpreted that as being a place to reflect and to be able to sit and enjoy the view and the park. And it's adjacent to the playground, so it complements the space. But this just lists the amazing work that the Rotary Club do. And the actual location, I'm sure everyone's completely familiar with this. It's probably the best space in Mafio, if not Nanaimo, and it hasn't been developed as a particular space. It's just the walkway with that incredible view at the northwest corner there. So this just shows how the area in blue on the corner on that slide relates to the rest of the park, and the playground especially just south of it, and the path going through to Newcastle Island Ferry and so on. I'm sure everyone's incredibly familiar with this. So we just very briefly, it's obviously it's fill, it's a man-made space, but we wanted to reflect at least the coast there to try and have it a little more atmospheric. And so we drew inspiration from Piper's shoreline and that intertidal zone, the vegetation, and just that lovely cross-section of materials with the plants going to the pebbles and down to tide pools. And then patterns in the sea and the water and light. And then this was the design that we came up with, and there's just something about that space and the Rotarians circle and all that means. So there's a kind of layering of meaning in this, as well as being a nice space. How am I doing for time? Shall I hurry up? So it's basically a center space of paving, and then with a trellis, a shelter around the edge, so you can sit and look out at the views of Newcastle Island. And then there's expanding rings of vegetation, and we hope that the children could go through the little paths, we could identify the plants and so on. So it's basically a space you can enter from different directions, but there's a place that you can sit with your back to quietness and look out over the view. And we were inspired by trellises, the Olympic Village, and so on, sort of quite contemporary, but with some kind of flowing kind of motion to it. And then we're hoping to put some kind of lighting in that will, from the water, will draw attention to it as well, and be fun to be in at night. Is also from the safety point of view, to light it is important. And the benches were symbolic of logs having been washed up on the beach, so we're kind of going to use that kind of, again, a contemporary bench, but we'll put backs on so it's nicer for the more elderly or to read a book or so on. And then the paving patterns, again, we hope to reflect the sort of waves in the sea. We haven't quite got to that stage yet, but we're developing that. And then there'll be signs that explain the Rotary, what Rotary do, and also we're hoping to put some kind of plant information on those signs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Drakeford. Questions for the delegation? Well, I just can't resist saying something at least.
One question for staff.
Because I want to thank the Rotary Club and all its members who've supported this project. Every year, as many of you know, there's a ceremony to recognize the victims of the dropping of the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki every year. There's a lantern ceremony conducted down in that park, and the concept that there be a peace park there, I think, is a wonderful idea. And I just want to express on behalf of Council to Rotary and Ms. Drakeford and those involved in this project how pleased we are to see this happen. I have no idea what the recommendation might be in terms of the vote, how it may pass, but I'm presupposing that one should never look such a tremendous gift horse in the mouth. So thank you. Any questions for staff? Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Through this, I'm wondering if this has gone to Snuneymuxw First Nation to look at as well, and if not, I would like to make the recommendation that the POG bring this forward.
Mr. Harding.
Yes, the Namath Nation has been aware of the project. We'll continue to liaise with them. We're actually working with elders and some other staff on the playground adjacent to it on a First Nations theme of the playground. So both projects have been advised to SFN. As we get through some more detailed design, we'll continue with that.
Thank you.
Very good. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. Would it be appropriate to move the motion as recommended? Approve, amend, direct? I can read it out if you'd like.
Yes, seconded. Councillor Martman. Do you wish to speak to it?
Just, I think this is a beautiful project, and I'm really pleased to see this corner of the park be used for something so beautiful. So, thank you.
Councillor Martman, did you wish to say anything or just second the motion?
Second motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Councillor Bonner?
That's what I was just going to say, how much I'm in favor of this thing, so I'll just vote.
You should have your moment if you'd like.
Well, other than to say, I'm very happy that this is coming forward. Rotary has been contributing to the community for well over 100 years almost. And so I think this is just another project in a long list of projects they've done in our city. So I want to thank you for that. And on behalf of all the Rotarians here on this side of this, I would like to thank again you for putting this forward. And paying for the whole thing too. That was even better.
Well, on behalf of your mayor and his wife, who both benefited through Rotary programs in their past life, I'm more than happy to call for the vote on this motion. All those in favor? Contrary? Carried unanimously. Thank you so very, very much. This is a grand day to end the heavy work of council this evening, which we finally squeezed into. No correspondence. No other business? Question period?
There's no questions, Your
No
Worship.
questions? No procedural motions? Motion for adjournment? Councillor Turley, seconded Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you so much, everyone.